"Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." The voice was calm but carried a quiet firmness. Elijah Cole stood in the narrow airplane aisle, his boarding pass still glowing on his phone screen. Row 2, Seat A, his seat. The window seat he'd specifically chosen after a brutal week of cross-country meetings and sleepless nights. But now, a woman in a beige blazer and pearl earrings sat there, legs crossed, scrolling her phone like she owned the sky. She looked up, blinking once. "I don't think so," she said smoothly, not even glancing at his phone. Elijah tilted his head, a small polite smile on his lips. "It's 2A, right?" "Yes," she said, nodding. "That's what mine says, too. May I see it?" he asked. Her fingers hesitated over her screen, just a flicker, but she recovered quickly and turned it around. The digital ticket was right there, except Elijah didn't need to squint to see the truth. 3C, middle seat. Different row. He exhaled slowly. "That says 3C. The woman blinked, feigning confusion. "Oh, that must be a mistake. I always sit up front. Seats don't come with lifetime ownership," Elijah said softly. "You might want to check with the flight attendant." Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, maybe you can sit in mine this time. It's only one row back." A murmur rose among the nearby passengers. A businessman behind Elijah looked up from his laptop, frowning. The air thickened just slightly. Elijah's tone stayed even. "I'm afraid that won't work. I paid for this seat." The woman crossed her arms. "And I'm already in it. Maybe don't make a scene." That word, scene, landed like a spark in dry grass. Elijah had heard it before. In boardrooms, in restaurants, in first-class lounges. The polite warning that meant, "Don't stand up for yourself too loudly." "I'm not making a scene," he replied, voice steady. "I'm asking you to move." A flight attendant appeared, smiling with that airline politeness that always came before bad news. "Is there an issue here?" Before Elijah could speak, the woman jumped in. "Yes, this gentleman is insisting I'm in his seat, but I've always booked 2A. There must be some kind of mix-up." The attendant turned to Elijah. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" He handed over his phone. She looked, nodded. "Yes, 2A is correct." Then to the woman, "Ma'am, it seems your seat is actually 3C." The woman's expression hardened, but her voice stayed soft. "Well, I'm already here. He can take mine." The attendant hesitated. Too long. That pause, that tiny silence, said everything Elijah needed to hear. He met the attendant's eyes. "Are you seriously considering that?" Her practiced smile flickered. "We're just trying to keep things smooth, sir." Elijah leaned forward slightly. His words were quiet, but cut through the tension like glass. Smooth for who? And that's when every nearby passenger stopped pretending not to listen. The flight attendant's lips parted, but no words came out. The silence stretched, thick and awkward, until the woman in 2A broke it with a small, exasperated sigh. "Honestly," she said, shaking her head, "this is ridiculous. You're really going to hold up the entire flight over one seat? I'm already settled." "He can just move." Elijah's jaw tightened. "You mean the seat I paid for?" Her smile was condescending, polished. "It's just a seat, sweetheart. You'll still get to Dallas." That word, sweetheart, snapped something inside him. He'd been called many things in his climb to the top. Boss, sir, visionary. But that was how people dismissed waiters, interns, and those they thought beneath them. A murmur rippled across first class. A man in the aisle whispered, "Unbelievable." Someone else muttered, "She's in the wrong seat. What's the issue?" The attendant cleared her throat, forcing a professional smile. "Sir, maybe you could take 3C just for this flight. We really don't want to delay departure." Elijah looked at her slowly, disbelief in his eyes. "Let me get this straight. She takes my seat, you confirm it's mine, and your solution is that I move?" The attendant's cheeks flushed. "It's just to keep things calm." He leaned back slightly, voice low but carrying across the cabin. "Calm for whom?" "Because it seems the only person uncomfortable here is me." The woman, Caroline, as her boarding pass revealed, crossed her legs, smirking slightly. "Oh, come on. Don't make this a big deal. It's not about you." Elijah chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "It's exactly about me." Now the whispers weren't whispers anymore. Passengers exchanged glances. A young woman across the aisle pulled out her phone, pretending to scroll, but her camera was clearly rolling. The attendant shifted her weight. "Sir, please," Elijah cut her off gently. "You want me to move because it's easier. Because confronting her would make you uncomfortable." The woman stiffened. "Excuse me?" "No," Elijah said quietly. "You don't want an excuse. You want to stay in control. That's the difference." The tension was electric now. The attendant's practiced calm was slipping. Her eyes darted toward the galley, looking for backup. Another flight attendant, a tall man with close-cropped hair and a too-wide smile, approached. His name tag read Mark. "Is there a problem?" Mark asked, his tone sharp beneath the polite veneer. "Yes," Elijah said simply, turning toward him. "This woman took my seat. Everyone here knows it. And instead of asking her to move, your colleague suggested I give it up." Mark exhaled. "Sir, if you could just take 3C, we can get going." Caroline smiled again, smug and unbothered. Elijah looked at Mark for a long moment. "You know," he said finally, voice quiet but resonant, "I've been told to move my entire life, in boardrooms, in hotels, in restaurants, but not today." He slipped his carry-on into the overhead compartment, adjusted his jacket, and sat down in 2A. Caroline's jaw dropped. "You can't just—" Elijah looked up calmly. "Watch me." The entire cabin went still. Caroline's eyes went wide, disbelief twisting her polished expression into something sharp. "This is outrageous," she hissed, gripping the armrest as if ownership came with pressure. "You can't just sit there." Elijah didn't even look at her. He adjusted his seatbelt, his movements calm and deliberate. "Ma'am," he said, tone cool as marble, "I paid for this seat. You're welcome to return to yours any time." The attendant, Kelly, stood frozen in the aisle, her hands clasped in front of her like a shield. "Sir, please, this isn't the way to handle things." "This is the way," Elijah interrupted softly. "You've confirmed it's my seat. So why is this still a discussion?" Whispers swirled through the cabin like static. A man across the aisle leaned over to his wife. "He's right," he muttered. "What's wrong with these people?" Another passenger quietly pulled out their phone, angling the lens toward the confrontation. Caroline crossed her arms. "You're being aggressive," she snapped, her voice rising just enough to draw every eye in first class. Elijah turned his gaze toward her. Calm, steady, aggressive, he echoed. "Because I'm not backing down?" That word. People like you love using it when someone refuses to stay quiet. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Kelly took a small step back, panic flickering behind her professional smile. "Please," she said, glancing toward the galley, "let's not escalate this. We'll get the captain if we have to." "Maybe you should," Elijah replied evenly, "because this isn't about one seat anymore. It's about how quickly you decided my comfort was optional." Kelly froze. Around them, the tension thickened into something tangible. A woman 2 rows back called out, "He's got a point." Another voice added, "If he paid for 2A, why's she still there?" Caroline's cheeks flushed red, but her pride held firm. "This is harassment," she barked suddenly, grabbing her phone as if the lens would turn her into the victim. Elijah leaned slightly toward her, his voice barely above a whisper, but everyone could hear it. "No, harassment is when someone takes what isn't theirs and pretends they're the one being wronged." Gasps, murmurs, a ripple of quiet applause from the back of the cabin. Kelly's composure cracked. She tapped her earpiece and whispered, "I need assistance in first class." Elijah leaned back in his seat, eyes forward. "You can call whoever you need," he said calmly. "I'm not moving." Seconds later, Mark reappeared, the tall attendant with the forced smile from earlier. "Sir," he said, his voice tense beneath the polite tone, "if you don't comply, we'll have to delay departure." Elijah looked up, his expression unreadable. "Then delay it," he said simply, "because I'm not standing up for comfort anymore. I'm standing up for respect." And that's when the cabin doors stopped closing, the entire flight frozen, in the airless tension of one man's refusal to shrink. The hum of the plane's engines was the only sound for a long, heavy moment. Every passenger in first class could feel the tension pressing against their chests, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mark straightened, his voice clipped. "Sir, I'm asking one last time. Please take 3C so we can get this flight moving." Elijah didn't flinch. "And I'm saying for the last time, no." Caroline scoffed loudly. turning to the passengers around her as if building an audience. "Can you believe this? He's making everyone late over one stupid seat." But this time, the crowd didn't rally to her side. A businessman near the bulkhead spoke up. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you're the one sitting where you shouldn't be." A woman in row 3 added, "Yeah, maybe move and stop wasting everyone's time." Caroline's jaw clenched. Her entitlement wavered, but her pride dug its heels in deeper. "I've flown this airline for 15 years. I shouldn't be treated like this." Elijah turned to her, his voice steady and controlled. "And how should you be treated? Like the rules don't apply to you?" She froze, caught off guard by the calm precision of his tone. Kelly, the attendant, tried again, her voice pleading now. "Sir, please understand, we're just trying to de-escalate." Elijah looked directly at her. "You're not de-escalating. You're deflecting. You're trying to make me responsible for someone else's disrespect." The words hit harder than anyone expected. A hush fell again. Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but stopped when she saw the faces watching her. Passengers shaking their heads, whispering, recording. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "If you keep refusing, we'll have to involve the captain." Elijah nodded slowly. "You do that?" Mark hesitated. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not like this, not by someone so composed. "All right," he muttered, walking briskly toward the cockpit. As he disappeared, Caroline crossed her arms, muttering under her breath, "This is absurd. I just wanted to sit comfortably." Elijah glanced at her. "You could have done that in your own seat." Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't answer. Across the aisle, someone whispered, "Good for him." Another passenger murmured, "About time someone stood up." Then, the door to the cockpit opened. The captain stepped out, tall, silver-haired, with the posture of a man used to control. His name tag read Captain Reynolds. The chatter died instantly. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, scanning the faces. Mark gestured toward Elijah and Caroline. "Seat dispute. She's in 2A, but it belongs to him. He's refusing to move." Captain Reynolds looked at both boarding passes, silent for a long moment. Finally, he said flatly, "Seat 2A belongs to Mr. Cole." Gasps fluttered across the cabin. Caroline blinked rapidly. "Wait, what? That can't be right. I always sit here." The captain's voice hardened. "You'll need to move to 3C, ma'am." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elijah simply nodded once. "Thank you, Captain." And though his tone was calm, every passenger in that cabin could feel it. The tide had turned. Caroline's face flushed red, the color of embarrassment and disbelief colliding all at once. Her manicured fingers gripped the armrest as though the leather itself could save her pride. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "I booked this seat weeks ago. There must be some kind of mistake." Captain Reynolds didn't blink. "There's no mistake, ma'am. The system shows clearly. Seat 2A was purchased by Mr. Cole. Your boarding pass says 3C. You'll need to move there now." Her jaw dropped slightly. "You can't possibly expect me to move back there." A few passengers laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when someone's arrogance has finally met a wall. The captain's voice stayed steady, but his eyes narrowed just enough to convey finality. "That's exactly what I expect." Elijah didn't gloat. He sat quietly, his gaze steady on the captain, not the woman beside him. "I appreciate you clearing that up," he said evenly. Caroline's frustration boiled over. "You don't understand. I fly this airline every month. I'm a platinum member." The captain cut her off, and platinum members still follow the rules. The cabin erupted in quiet murmurs, some approving, others just stunned. Caroline glanced around, suddenly aware of every phone camera aimed her way. For the first time, her confidence faltered. Elijah finally turned his head toward her, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, no one's trying to embarrass you, but respect goes both ways. You can't demand it while denying it to someone else." Caroline's lips parted, but the words she wanted didn't come. Instead, she muttered something inaudible and clutched her purse tightly. Captain Reynolds stepped aside, gesturing toward row 3. "Miss, please move to your assigned seat so we can proceed with boarding." Her chin trembled slightly, but she stood. Every step she took backward felt heavier than the last, the murmurs following her like a quiet storm. As she sank into 3C, a few passengers clapped, soft at first, then louder, like a wave of justice sweeping the cabin. Elijah didn't move. He didn't smile. He just exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. Kelly, the attendant, stood frozen, her earlier confidence gone. The captain turned to her and Mark, his tone sharp. "This should have never reached my attention. A mix-up like this reflects poorly on us. Handle it properly next time," Kelly's voice cracked. "Yes, Captain," Reynolds nodded to Elijah. "Mr. Cole, thank you for your patience." Elijah inclined his head slightly. "Thank you for doing what's right." The captain gave one final nod, turned and disappeared into the cockpit. The cabin settled, though the energy in the air still buzzed. Passengers whispered words like respect, about time, and good for him. Elijah looked out the window as the sun dipped low over the runway. He didn't feel victorious, only vindicated. For once, he hadn't been asked to shrink to make others comfortable. For once, doing the right thing had actually been done. The engines roared to life, but the tension in the cabin still hadn't lifted. Caroline sat rigidly in 3C, her face turned toward the window, pretending to scroll through her phone though her hands trembled slightly. Around her, whispers danced like static. The truth was out, but the weight of it lingered. Elijah leaned back in his seat, eyes closed for a moment. He wasn't celebrating, he was processing. The hum of the aircraft blended with the thrum of his pulse. For years he'd learned to let things slide. The subtle comments, the dismissive looks, the moments when people mistook his calm for compliance. But this time, he hadn't let it go. He turned slightly as Kelly approached again, her face carefully composed, the same polite mask as before, but her tone had changed. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "on behalf of the crew, I want to apologize for the misunderstanding earlier." Elijah opened his eyes and met hers. "A misunderstanding," he repeated slowly. "That's one way to put it," Kelly swallowed. "It's not our intention to make any passenger feel disrespected. We just try to keep things smooth," he nodded. "Smooth for who?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. "Because what happened back there wasn't about smoothness," he continued quietly. "It was about convenience. It was easier to move me than to confront her. And that's how this kind of thing keeps happening." Kelly's eyes flickered with guilt. "You're right," she said finally, voice low. "It shouldn't have gone that far." "It usually does," Elijah replied. "Just not with cameras rolling." The line hit her harder than he intended. Kelly stepped back, her posture stiffening as she retreated toward the galley, leaving Elijah to his thoughts. A middle-aged man across the aisle leaned over. "Hey," he said under his breath. "Just wanted to say you handled that better than most people would have." Elijah offered a faint smile. "I've had practice," the man nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I figured." Minutes later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cleared for takeoff. Flight time to Dallas is 2 hours and 20 minutes. Thank you for your patience." The plane began to taxi. Outside, the sunset painted streaks of orange and gold across the tarmac, but inside, it was still heavy. The silence after confrontation. Caroline shifted in her seat, refusing to look forward, though every now and then she felt the stairs prickling her neck. Elijah gazed out the window, the reflection of the fading light brushing across his face. He wasn't angry anymore. He was resolved. This wasn't just about one flight or one entitled passenger. It was about the quiet, constant compromises people like him were expected to make, the moments when dignity was traded for keeping the peace. Not today. As the plane lifted into the sky, Elijah made himself a silent promise. This wouldn't end at 30,000 feet. He was going to make sure this flight, and everything it represented, would have consequences that reached far beyond the clouds. The seatbelt sign dimmed, and the cabin eased into a cautious quiet. The chaos had settled, but the echo of what had happened still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Passengers whispered across aisles, trading fragments of the story, glancing toward Elijah in 2A as though he were the center of a storm that had finally begun to calm. Elijah stared straight ahead, his thought sharper than the hum of the engines. He'd been in boardrooms filled with powerful people who smiled while undercutting him. He'd seen how silence became permission, and how people in his position were expected to give it. But not this time. This time, silence had lost. The curtain to the galley fluttered, and Mark appeared again, looking uncomfortable. He cleared his throat quietly. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice lower now, stripped of authority. "The captain wanted me to let you know. He appreciates your patience earlier." Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Patience?" Mark hesitated. "Yes, sir. And he also wanted to assure you that a formal report will be made about the incident." Elijah studied him for a moment before replying. "Good. Make sure that report includes how I was asked to move from a seat I paid for." Mark nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Yes, sir. It will." As the attendant walked away, Elijah glanced back, just in time to see Caroline watching him. Her expression wasn't defiant anymore. It was unreadable, somewhere between guilt and disbelief. When she realized he'd caught her looking, she quickly turned toward the window. Moments later, a woman across the aisle leaned over slightly. "Excuse me," she whispered. "I just want to say thank you for not backing down." Elijah offered a small, polite smile. "You shouldn't have to thank someone for that." "I know," she said, "but the truth is, most of us don't. We just let things slide." Her words hit him deeper than he expected. "That's the problem," he murmured. The rest of the flight carried on in uneasy silence. Drink carts rolled, phones glowed faintly, and conversation returned in hushed tones. But the mood was different. Heavier, more aware. People weren't just talking about what happened. They were thinking about it. An hour before landing, Elijah pulled out his tablet. Instead of watching a movie, he opened an email draft, addressed to the airline's corporate board. Subject: Incident Report, Flight 4732, Phoenix to Dallas. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, then began to move. To the board, "Tonight, I experienced something I've seen happen too many times. The quiet dismissal of fairness in favor of convenience. Your crew confirmed my seat was correct, yet I was still asked to move to keep things smooth. That phrase, smooth, is where the problem lies." He paused, reading the words, then continued typing, his tone firm but measured. This wasn't a complaint. It was a demand for accountability. As he finished the draft, he noticed his reflection in the darkened window, calm, composed, and certain. The same quiet power that had built his company now pulsed through him again. He smiled faintly. He wasn't just reclaiming a seat. He was reclaiming something bigger. Outside, the night deepened, and the city lights of Dallas began to glimmer far below. Elijah Cole was coming home, but not as the same man who had boarded in Phoenix. The wheels hit the runway with a jolt, and the cabin filled with the familiar sound of clattering trays and exhaled relief. The passengers were quiet now, the kind of silence that follows something unforgettable. Phones buzzed back to life as the plane taxied toward the gate, notifications pinging like echoes of what had just happened. Elijah stayed seated, watching the lights of Dallas blink through the window. He felt calm, centered, not victorious, just grounded. The kind of calm that comes when you know you've finally stopped swallowing things that should have been spoken. Kelly made the final announcement with a voice that carried a trace of weariness. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas. On behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us." Her words sounded routine, but her eyes, when they flicked briefly toward Elijah, carried something closer to respect. As passengers began to stand, gathering their bags, the man in the navy blazer from earlier reached across the aisle. "You did good, man," he said quietly. "Most people would have let it slide." Elijah gave a small smile. "That's the problem, isn't it? Too many of us let things slide." A few others murmured their agreement, offering nods, handshakes, quiet acknowledgments that didn't need explanation. Caroline rose from 3C, her movements stiff, eyes avoiding every gaze that followed her. Her phone was still clutched in her hand, though the fight had drained out of her. When she passed Elijah, she hesitated, just a second, then muttered under her breath, "Didn't mean for it to go that far." Elijah looked at her evenly. It went exactly as far as it needed to. No anger, just truth. She walked off without another word. When Elijah stepped into the terminal, the cool air hit him like a reset. But as he pulled out his phone, the world was already waiting. His name wasn't trending, yet, but the story was. Videos of the confrontation had flooded social media, captions blazing. "Black CEO refuses to give up his seat. Airline delays flight. Passenger stands his ground against unfair treatment. He scrolled through hundreds of comments, some praising his composure, others dissecting the scene. But what struck him most were the messages from strangers. You stood up for more than a seat. Thank you for not staying quiet. You made people see it. At baggage claim, his phone buzzed again. An email from Angela Ruiz, the operations manager who had intervened earlier. Subject: follow-up and apology. Mr. Cole, following last night's incident, the airline has initiated a full review of crew response procedures. We deeply regret the situation and will be implementing new bias and escalation training immediately. Thank you for your professionalism and for holding us accountable. Elijah read it once, twice. Then he smiled faintly. Accountability. It was a start. He typed a short reply. Appreciate the action. Let's make sure it's more than policy. Make it culture. Outside, the Texas night wrapped around him like calm after a storm. He breathed deep, lifted his suitcase, and walked toward the exit, the hum of the terminal fading behind him. Some fights happen in boardrooms, others at 30,000 feet. But every one of them starts the same way, with a simple choice: to stay seated or to stand up. And on that night, Elijah Cole didn't just keep his seat. He changed what it meant to earn it. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that respect isn't given, it's claimed. Like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that inspire courage, dignity, and strength.